So the finance industry, many people like myself are, being open with the reality of what's going on here. Here we've got a video that I'm going to react to around someone who quit their six-figure investment banking job, someone called Hannah, and we're going to see her perspective and what she has to say.
Number one, I used to be so scared to tell anyone on my team about my weekend plans because I got burned so many times. It felt like the instant I shared that I was doing anything fun over the weekend, like celebrating a friend's birthday or having a friend visit from out of town, it was instantly interpreted as, oh, Hannah doesn't have enough work to do, so we need to give her more work and staff her on a project. Number two, one time my managing director had to fly somewhere for a client meeting and she had forgotten the pitch books that we printed for her in the office. So, because I was the last analyst left in the office at 1 a.m., I had the special honor of going to her house to deliver these pitch books. It was an hour away, and I still had to go to work the next morning. And let me tell you, I felt like Anne Hathaway in The Devil Wears Prada, terrified that anyone would see me. And of course, I did this. And the following days, she never acknowledged or thanked me for doing any of that, which I didn't expect. It's just kind of a funny situation in hindsight.
So that's just an opening clip, right, in terms of why she was dealing with some of the issues in investment banking and why she quit. Now, the first thing I wanted to mention, because I dealt with that too, if you're new to the channel, I've worked at Goldman's, investment banking, other top companies, so I have similar experience. Without naming the company, one thing I noticed is if you have weekend plans, they'll be quite judgmental of them because you're not working or you're not socializing or spending your free time in a way that they would approve of, right? For example, if you're spending time with friends, they might give you more work. There's a kind of toxic environment there where they feel like if they're miserable at work or they're working on the weekend that you have to be, even if there's no work to do, and that's when they could come up with pointless work tasks. They kind of want you to be miserable. It's not about actually having real work to do. It's about busy work, which is just pointless admin that they want you to do just to give people busy work to do. People love to project their unhappiness in the office, right? In their personal life, they might be projecting that onto you. And it's not about the work, it's about control, right? And that's what we kind of see here. I remember a co-worker who was working with a very disgruntled, unhappy manager, and people noticed that that disgruntled, unhappy manager was kind of bullying the more junior employee. But it turns out this manager was kind of unhappy in their personal life. They were single and things like that. And after this particular manager had got his kind of personal life improved, and then his attitude in the workplace also improved, which is kind of funny because often you don't see those type of instances. Often when a manager's just miserable, you might not know why, but typically it has nothing to do with their ability to do the job, or your ability to do the job, and why they're bullying you is something unhappy in their personal life and they're using that to have a go at you. Now, if we have to keep kind of going through this in a few different examples, let's think about another co-worker I had, another manager I dealt with, right? In this case, I had a manager who is always whinging about things. He's whinging about how he felt he looked old for his age. Again, how he didn't have any girlfriends, even though he had a typical left-wing liberal male type of feminist friend zone approach in life. And he would project a lot of his negativity on others, right? Or other people who had happy personal lives, or people who were just content with themselves, right? And then he would pick little things to nitpick and have a go at me in my personal life, the same way she dealt with on her weekends, right? In the sense that if I'm meeting up with friends or family, because he preferred to socialize with co-workers and thought that meeting with your family was boring, you'd always make these little digs about that, right? And this is the thing, they have this issue where either they might be assigning work to you on the weekends, like she dealt with. The other thing is sometimes they'll judge you on how you spend your free time. If your co-workers are going to nightclubs, bars, art galleries, and they think that makes them high class and things like that, or you don't have the same opinions as them, they'll create an unnecessary issue with you, like conflict with you. If you have different opinions on, if a topic of philosophy comes up and I have a different view, maybe I listened or I've read Nietzsche or Evola or Spengler, things like that, and because I don't fit in with their kind of maybe more left-leaning approach, that becomes an issue and impacts your career. All these type of weird instances you have to deal with. Second thing is about working outside of work hours, which she was doing when she was delivering this work document to her senior manager late at night. I've had instances where I've been working late in the evening and had to get an Uber back home because it was so late there weren't no buses running. These are the type of instances you might have to deal with, right? I remember the thing with me, I didn't typically have to work weekends, but there's one or few times where I'd have to go back to the office to do extra work that wasn't necessarily acknowledged or not reciprocated with help or patience on other matters. So sometimes I might head into work on a Sunday to help my manager with something, because he couldn't do it because he was traveling for work, and then I'm not going to get acknowledged for that. And even when I'm back in the office and maybe on a Wednesday afternoon I have a question for my manager, he'll just ignore me to my face multiple times, and it's like, I went out my way to help you, but now you're just being difficult with me for no reason. These are the type of things. It just doesn't make sense for some people, certain situations, to be in the certain industries where they can be quite toxic. I remember instances where I was doing a piece of work and it's going to be reviewed by audit and no one was helping me, my manager, my co-workers, and I ended up staying quite late to do it. But I didn't even know because people would just ignore my questions, straight up ignore them. So this is the thing, you get no help and if you stay quite late to figure it out yourself. So let's listen to her other issues that she was dealing with.
Unspoken rule that the most junior analyst needed to go pour tea for everyone there, starting with the client CEO down to the CFO and then down to the more junior people on the client side. I did not know this unspoken rule because I grew up in the US. This was not something I knew about or that anyone had ever told me. But if you poured tea in the wrong order, you would then get yelled at, which I did. Number four, this one gets into slightly serious territory because when it happened to me, I was like, I seriously need to reevaluate my life. But my great grandmother passed away while I was working in banking. And because Hong Kong was a short flight from China where she was, I took a flight that weekend to go to her funeral and to see the family. And even though I had cleared this with the team, I was still asked to work. So yeah, I wasn't scared to leave the job. I was scared of staying there and disappointing my family. Number five, if you're not familiar with the way that investment banking works, a lot of the reason why a junior analyst job is really terrible is because you will prepare a pitch book or an analysis or a model, and you'll turn a series of comments from your associate, and then it goes to the VP who gives comments, then it goes to the executive director who gives comments, and then the managing director who gives comments. And you can go through multiple cycles of this, sometimes in a night, 2 nights over the course of a week. And a big part of why it's a really difficult job is you never know when those comments are going to come, but when they do, you have to act on them almost immediately. And if you forget to turn anything, you get yelled at. So, one of my core experiences, and something like this happened multiple times, is when we got an assignment on Friday to put together a deck for a meeting on Monday. I distinctly recall my associate and I putting together a deck that was ready by 3 p.m. on Friday, waiting around and not getting comments until 11 p.m., which meant that we could only start working on that pitch deck at 11 p.m., finishing the deck in a couple hours. And maybe it's like 5 or 6 a.m. when we send this pitch deck to the next reviewer. But then most of the time, we wouldn't get the next set of comments back until 11 hours later. And it was always at an insane time, like 11 p.m., 12 midnight. So you would just be sitting around for the entire day until you got those comments.
So these are the type of things you have to deal with in terms of pointless hierarchy mind games. She mentioned pouring tea and then getting yelled at because she was not pouring it for the most senior members of the team or the client, and she's not even told about these rules and she gets yelled at. Getting yelled at for not being told things, even when you ask questions, is quite common in the finance industry and many other top corporations, top corporate roles across other industries. So I'll give you a funny example of this. I know in one particular investment bank I was working at, if you're new to the channel, I worked at Goldman, Morgan Stanley and other companies like that. Without naming the company, I remember one company where you had to be careful which manager you put in terms of the order of the email addresses. So if you have the two in the CC section, it's like you've got to put the most senior person first, then the person beneath them, then the person beneath them. You have to kind of order the to line and the CC line based on, you know, who's the most senior to least senior. It's just a bit ridiculous when everyone's going to get the email at the same time. The other thing is around, I remember working early on in my career where I would, get water for myself from the water filter that we have at the office, right? The water cooler is. But they had this rule on the team where if one person gets up to get their own water, they have to ask all the other team members if they want water to get them cups of water too, or tea or whatever, which is just a bit ridiculous. I would never ask anyone else to get me water, I would just get it myself. But it's like this typical pointless rule, and then they kept pushing me to do it. And I was going to leave the team anyway because I had another team I was going to. But then I think I did it one time, but I just thought it was completely ridiculous and demeaning. Like, if you're getting up to get water, doesn't mean you have to ask every team member if they want water, tea, or coffee, and then get it like a tea lady or like the coffee barista. It's a bit ridiculous. And then the thing is that I've seen other people who worked on trading floors and they have to get coffee, breakfast, lunch orders, or snacks for the team. I don't think it matters that much if you're like doing it once in a while or you're more junior, but the fact that they kind of do it in a demeaning way, like you're the more junior person, so you have to do this, you have to take all our breakfast orders, like go and get it from the local, health bar or whatever it would be, right? It's just a bit like, you can get that yourself, or maybe one team member on a weekly basis can be responsible for that. You don't have to like be demeaning to more junior employees to treat them like trash, because that kind of abusive relationship, the same way you might have in families, it goes from one generation to the next, right? So they always take advantage of the most junior person, which just seems unnecessary. Then if you have a family emergencies, which is another point she was mentioning here, you might be still asked to work during a funeral trip. Things like this is quite ridiculous. I remember one time they approved some time off for myself to see a family member in the hospital. But the thing is, it was for a couple days, but we were doing a massive project at the time, but no one was covering my aspect of the project in that time. So when I kind of had time away from the hospital, I kind of had to log in and do some of that work myself. And it's the type of things where they're similar to what I mentioned earlier, where they might blank you to your face and be quite dismissive of you when you ask questions. They're not going to tell you, oh, you're taking a couple of days off, so we'll pick up that particular work task you're doing. They'll just assume someone else will do it, or you'll figure out you have to do it. Do you know what I mean? This is the type of ridiculousness you have to deal with. So you're always on call, even if you're dealing with serious family matters. And I had to dedicate some of that time to like reading long documents, sending emails and things like that. So it wasn't really a time off to spend with my family member at the time in an urgent situation. And then point number 5 is feedback, comments. Now, it's kind of funny because, like she's saying here, there is like an unnecessary bully culture in the corporate environment sometimes. It's not a productive culture, it's like a bully culture. And what I mean by that is you're asking for clarification on some comments or feedback and they just ignore you, or if you don't do it immediately or you do it slightly wrong because they didn't give you clear instructions, you get yelled at, even though it's not your fault. It's the fact that the instructions, the feedback they gave you was kind of vague or not clear, right? I remember an instance where my managing director wanted me to write a draft email of advice for sales and traders. So I did it in a very detailed way to represent our team quite well and to make sure there's no gray areas so our team doesn't get accused later of not giving clear instructions to the trading floor, the sales and the traders. Now I wrote it in a detailed way, but between me and the managing director was another layer of management who told me to simplify it and make it add much less detail. So I completely made a much shorter version, and then a managing director complained to me that there wasn't enough detail, and it was like I did the right thing, but this middle management made me look bad in front of my managing director, and they're going to remember that for my end of year performance review, which would impact my salary, my bonus, right? Because they were annoyed about this one little email draft. These are the type of things that you're out of your control and you're dealing with very dysfunctional dynamics, even though you think these big corporations would be quite efficient. Other things could be, putting you deliberately in awkward situations where they don't respond to you on work tasks until Friday afternoon. Then you have to spend a late Friday afternoon to get things done. They're always putting you under insane, unnecessary time pressure, right? Where they don't have to do that if they run things efficiently in a timely manner. And this is annoying because you don't do nothing wrong, but you feel like you're always running late. But it's really other people who are delaying you and creating lateness for you. And then you have to kind of deal with it.
The most detail-oriented person in the world. One time I had turned the comments that my executive director had given me, and he printed out the deck, which a lot of them do, and he circled something that looked like a space to me, and he said, "What is this?" And I was like, "I don't know. What is this?" And he had circled 2 spaces that were next to each other because I had accidentally pressed the space bar twice, and he was able to see that from a printed piece of paper. So bankers are crazy. Number 7, I don't even know what number we're on now, but also related to the whole comments turning infrastructure and I guess my lack of being detail oriented is One time I worked for 25 hours, and this is true. I probably have texts that I sent to my friends that day documenting how insane this was. But I sat down at the desk at 10 a.m. and then I didn't get up until 11 a.m. the next day to go home and shower and then come right back to the office. But I was basically working on a pitch deck with my associate during that entire 25 hours, and we had not slept in order to get this pitch deck ready for a meeting the next day. The meeting happened, and our executive director, who was in the meeting, came back from it and tossed the PowerPoint on my desk and said, "Oh, what the fuck is this?" And I was like, "Oh no, what did I do this time?" And it was like a 50-page deck, and she flipped open to one page where I had made a pie chart and I had mislabeled one of the pie charts. So something that looked like 50% said it was 5%. Yes, it was a mistake, and people who are truly detail oriented would not make this kind of mistake. But unfortunately, I had not slept for 25 hours working on this PowerPoint, and I just felt like, wow, this is just not the right environment for me. This is not how I think and operate and do my best work.
So that's an interesting perspective she's sharing there, right? So when it comes to these type of instances, they love to nitpick, double spacing, right? And little issues they might point out for you, but not for others. I remember dealing with a female team member in sales who at an American investment bank I won't name, and she can do some basic things when it comes to PowerPoint editing, and she was nitpicking some email that I sent her because she didn't know how to edit a PowerPoint. There's so many ridiculous things you'll deal with in the office where you have all these nitpicking on little things you do wrong, but if someone's in the good books of management, or some people, they just don't care or care to notice, right? It's just like they have a bully culture, right, where they just want to vent their frustrations in their life at you. She mentions here working a 25-hour work day straight. I haven't worked 25 hours straight, but I've had some long work days, right? And no one really cares, right? You don't get appreciation for it or even paid well for it, after a point that doesn't seem like it's worth the high salary you might be getting. The other phrase here is misery loves company that I want to mention, right? It's a culture of it's never good enough. It's always your fault. One bad mistake can be setting you up to be fired next year. So you always feel under pressure, right? And she mentions making that slight mistake, having 5% instead of 50% on a one small error on a PowerPoint. They want to break you. They want to break you mentally. So you're always submissive and cowering down and looking for their approval. I remember dealing with this when, before a very senior meeting with the head of the trading floor, I was preparing the names of companies we were engaged with in leverage finance, in loan trading, and there was one odd company that I couldn't match up because I was working on a document from a previous employee who had moved on because he got fed up of the manager too, which I found out later. But I just couldn't match this one number up because it just wasn't aligning. There wasn't like clear data in the Excel file, and I kept asking my manager, like, before you head to this meeting, I'm preparing the document, I'm not going to the meeting myself. I'm saying, can you just help me with this? I don't know what this one particular company is. It's not lining up with all the other data we have. It's like one odd number. And he was just like not helping me, ignoring me. He wasn't even doing much work. He was just sitting there chilling at the desk, right, pretending to read emails. And then after the meeting, he had a go at me. And it's like, I pointed this out to you multiple times. But again, like, you can never really protect yourself. And this is a very important lesson in your career, in your personal life, unless it's in writing. If someone's bullying you or being manipulative in real life, they know it's not in writing, so they just think it's not a big deal. So next time in that situation, I was sitting next to him, so he should have responded. But if someone's being really difficult and you think they're going to set you up to fail, just send them an email just saying, okay, this is what I've got. There's one odd number or one odd company I can't find. Can you point this out to me? And if they don't respond, then it's their fault. And I remember later on in my career, I asked the manager to come clarify something for me I wasn't sure on, and she didn't know herself. And then I got blamed for it in my performance review. And it's a little small point, a little small different in description. And it's just like, well, I did ask the manager, and here's the email where I asked them. If they don't know or they can't help me, then how am I being blamed when I pointed out I wasn't sure at the time? These are the type of small little mind games they play with you, and you've got to kind of protect yourself, otherwise they're going to walk all over you.
In investment banking was just the lack of communication and coordination. And what this looked like a lot of the time was if a senior person at your bank assigned you something, you really were not allowed to ask clarifying questions. I have actually had this experience when I first joined because I came from a much more collaborative environment where I would ask a question after I got an assignment in order to clarify that I was doing it the right way. And then I would get absolutely no response. So I quickly learned to not ask questions. But then the ironic thing about this, and then if you do it the wrong way and not the way the senior person wanted, you would get comments like, I didn't want you to do it this way. Why did you do it this way? Even though they never answered your question. Number 10, similarly, so the way that capital markets work is that, say you're doing an IPO, and you're part of a bank, you're probably working with 3 or 4 other banks that are underwriting the deal, and lawyers and auditors and all kinds of people in the financial infrastructure that are needed to get this deal done. And there was so much overlapping work that happened between all of these parties, it was crazy. And this really trickles down because there were so many times where an associate or a VP would ask me to do something where I would go, "Hold on, isn't another bank already doing this?" And a lot of the times that happened because they didn't trust the other party's estimates or their work, but so much of it was just a lack of coordination, and so the same work would get done multiple times by multiple people. Number 11, let me just tell you a little bit more about how comments worked, because as an analyst, this will be 80 to 90% of the work that you do, which is getting and interpreting the comments of senior people and reflecting them to the best of your ability in Excel models, in PowerPoints, and in other types of work. Working in Asia is truly insane because I think the experience of getting and turning comments is just a little bit different. And let me tell you why. The way that my MD used to leave comments a lot of the time was by sending 40 WeChat voice notes. And this was back before you could transcribe them into text. So in order to understand what she said and what she wanted you to do, you would have to go back and re listen to each one of those voice notes, which was obviously a pain. And the other crazy thing about working in Hong Kong, especially as someone whose native language is only kind of Chinese, my family's Chinese, but I grew up in the US, so my Chinese is like okay. So I can speak, but I don't write or read super well. A lot of the comments that I would get from my associates and seniors who were from China would be a mix of English and Chinese. And a lot of the times they like to print out PowerPoints and handwrite things. And a lot of the time I had no idea what the Chinese comments said. So I would have to ask another analyst or associate to help me read the comments and then turn that.
So, before we move on to the analyst passing out, let's consider this in a bit more detail here, right? So, the thing is, this is what I mentioned earlier, right? You can't ask clarifying questions. It's never clear how they actually want something. And they want a reason to unload and their life frustrations, have a temper tantrum on the junior employees. And this is the thing, they'll use a little misunderstanding or lack of clarification of information to have a go at you. Another thing is the overlap in work, right? You have joint ventures between different banks or even within a bank, right? Infrastructure teams, approval committees, lots of bloated kind of teams that there shouldn't be duplication, but there is, right? There's so many so-called smart people who are taking a dumb approach for things, just following the consensus, even if it's very inefficiently done, just to fit in and feed the egos of senior management. And that's why what she mentioned earlier about, duplication of work, overlap of work, not doing things in a meaningful way, in a efficient way even, right? So when a work feels meaningless and it's going to be ripped to shreds, this is when people develop mental health issues, depression at work and things like that, and they have a feeling that it means nothing, their work means nothing, or someone else is going to get credit for it, or even someone else is doing something similar. It's very duplicative. You have to think, what's the point of me doing this if this other committee or other internal team or the joint bank that we're doing this venture with is doing something very similar? Like, you feel very devalued as a human being, even if you're on a high salary. Then you have to deal with all these MD's quirks, right? These managing director quirks, right? Management have all these weird practices that are very inefficient. In her cases, it's voice notes. People, if they're going to provide feedback, it should be written notes. If they're giving you voice notes, you have to listen to them, make a note of what they're saying, then make the changes in the document. It's completely inefficient. And then when it comes to my particular instance, I remember when you would send large emails with attachments to someone else at a particular company I was working at, what would happen is that the email system would automatically zip the file, but my managing director at the time, she didn't want to unzip files from an email, so I'd have to send it to another way, like create some different like tech loophole where the files weren't being zipped because she didn't want to unzip files, compressed files from an email. I'd have to send it to her another way, and it's completely ridiculous. Like, no one else in the company was requesting me to not send zipped compressed files on an email, apart from this one managing director, because she doesn't want to unzip files, which is very easy to do. You just download it and open the file. This is the type of ridiculousness you have to deal with, right? You just have to, put up with what she's mentioning here is people with different languages. Now we talk about these days, we have international markets, international business, and you're working with people from different backgrounds. Diversity is so good. She has to deal with managers who aren't speaking clear English or giving her clear instructions in a language she understands. I have to deal with many Europeans, right? And there are Europeans who, of course, speak good English, but some of them don't, and they'll have poor English or misunderstandings. I'd have to correct their English in PowerPoint, even though they're like seven-figure multimillionaire managing directors. And I understand English might not be their key priority if they're a sales contact dealing with clients all over Europe dealing with different languages, but it's like, I'm not here to be your English grammar instructor. I'm not here to correct all your small English mistakes in your marketing presentations with these complex financial products. I'm meant to be analyzing the financial element of it and not correcting your English. But these are the type of ridiculous scenarios you can get caught up in. Let's listen to more of what she has to say here.
At the time and now, a friend of mine who also worked in investment banking was at the gym. She was working out after having had a pretty long week where she pulled a couple all-nighters, and she collapsed while running on the treadmill. But that's not the craziest part. The craziest part is that she then went to the hospital, and 24 hours later, she was working again. She was like messaging me about some deal. So I think that was a huge reality check for both me and this friend in terms of what are we doing with our lives. And so, yes, I wasn't scared of leaving the job. I was scared of staying in the job. And speaking of dying, and this is really the last one that I don't want to make light of at all, this didn't happen at my bank, but we worked in the same building as Credit Suisse, where one morning I had taken a taxi to work because I was running late. And when the taxi pulled up to the building, it couldn't take the normal route because there was a bunch of police tape would normally park for drop off. I didn't really think much of it at the time, especially because I just didn't have time to stop and think about anything. But after I got to work that day, another person of my friend who worked at Credit Suisse messaged me saying, "Oh my God, did you see the news?" And I was like, "What news?" And someone from Credit Suisse, I don't know what department they worked in or what role they had, committed suicide. And that's why the area was blocked off. So yeah, this is what I meant when I said that industry is not a lie. These things happen. Even last year, this happened to someone at Bank of America in New York.
So the instance she's mentioning here, I think I've covered this in one of my previous videos, where Bank of America kind of deleted themselves. So the thing is, she's talking about her friend who collapsed after having a health issue and returned to work within 24 hours. I know at least 2 to 4 people I know who actually worked in finance industry had health issues. Look at some of my previous videos. And the thing is, there's a funny way of putting it, maybe a dark humor, but self-deletion is the final promotion, right, in some of the secret societies of the elite, right? So it's like people are sacrificing themselves to this system that really is quite evil and doesn't treat them well, even if they're earning maybe a high salary for a certain time period. You have to figure out what you really believe in and what your real life purpose is, rather than just pursuing one promotion after the other for the sake of it, or dealing with a bully culture which might make you miserable. So if you're interested in really taking control of your career, right, I have a career coaching program. There's a link in description. It'll help you achieve complete career control, developing a path from your current career to freedom, financial planning, outsmarting office politics, dealing with a lot of these toxic workplace dynamics, particularly as a man, dealing with promotions or dealing with layoffs if you're dealing with toxic co-workers. You might want to pursue quiet quitting, all types of different dynamics. Let me know in the comments how you feel about corporate culture. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now. Link in description to speak with me directly, and I'll see you next time.